What is up, everybody? So week 1 of the NFL is now officially in the books. We are in the midst of the NFL season, and I want to come in here today in this second episode and discuss all of the different things that went down this weekend. There were some crazy upsets. My Packers got absolutely destroyed, which was not a fun game for me. We had a crazy game last night, Monday Night Football. Russell Wilson returning to Seattle. That was a wild game. The ending was crazy. We'll talk about that. We'll also go through Joe Burrow throwing, 4 picks, the Bears upsetting the 49ers, the Chargers beating the Raiders, the Chiefs dominating without Tyreek Hill, Baker Mayfield barely comes up short, the Cowboys losing Dak Prescott for a while as well, the Giants beat the Titans. So we have a full-packed first week recap of the NFL, and I want to go through and give my thoughts on everything that happened. And if you guys are new here, I'm starting this NFL podcast, or I started it last week, I guess. And so this is the first installment of the actual, being in the midst of the NFL season. So feel free to subscribe if you want to stay tuned for future episodes, and I'll try to get all this onto Spotify and all that stuff in the coming week or so that way, because right now it's just on YouTube. But yeah, we'll get that stuff figured out. So I first want to start off with the game that is the freshest, and that's the Broncos-Seahawks game from last night. And that was absolutely crazy. I want to start off with I think the situational play calling that really shocked everyone around the NFL world, everyone who watches the NFL, every single person who was watching the game last night. If you were sitting at home, you were just sort of perplexed as the game started to end. Like, I was watching, it's third and 14, 15, something long. They run a play, it's 4th and 5. There's 40 seconds left. And the Broncos are sitting there with 2 or 3 timeouts. And I'm thinking to myself, why are they just letting the clock roll down? They need to convert the 4th down and then score. And they're just letting the time run down. You can see the announcers were confused too. What the heck is going on? What are you guys doing? And they let it roll all the way down. And it's okay. And they bring out their field goal unit. And I'm just sitting there what? What? I was am I dreaming? What's going on right now? So the Broncos and Nathaniel Hackett, who had a tough first game because everyone is on him now from that decision, they decide to try a 64-yard field goal instead of trying to convert a 4th and 5 with Russell Wilson. You pay Russell Wilson $200+ million, and then you're letting the game end on a 64-yard field goal attempt. So I want to show you this little stat I saw this morning from CBS Sports on Twitter. They said Russell Wilson on 4th and 5 or less in the fourth quarter in his career, 68.8% conversion percentage. Percentage of 64+ yard field goals made in the last 30 years, 6.1%. So it seemed like that was a terrible decision to kick that field goal. Even if you make that, people still would have been like, what are you doing? I think everyone's completely shocked that they didn't go for it on 4th down because it's 4th and 5. Russell Wilson, sure, he could have not completed that, but you have a much better chance to win that game if you convert the 4th down. You have 3 timeouts left. You still move the ball. And even if, let's say, they go for it on 4th and 5 and they don't convert, they had 3 timeouts. So they could have had a chance even on defense to stop them 3 times. So it was just a very poor decision for Nathaniel Hackett. And I think people were, with him being the new coach there in Denver, he was formerly with my Green Bay Packers as the offensive coordinator. I think he's a great coach. But in his first game, I just think it was a poor decision, a poor, clock management there at the end of the game. And I think it could have cost the Broncos the game. There are lots of other things in this game we'll talk about as well, but that decision there was very shocking to, I think, people around the world, around the NFL. And honestly, coming to this game, I thought the Broncos were going to win this game easily. That's what I assumed with the hype behind the Broncos, with Russell Wilson there, with all the talent they have at wide receiver. And Geno Smith comes in and beats Russell Wilson in his return to Seattle. And you could see from the start of that game, Russell Wilson coming in, everyone just booing Russell Wilson, which I guess it makes sense. You left your team, they're booing you. It's sort of, I guess, what you could sort of partly expect. But Geno Smith, he shocked me last night. 23 of 28, 195 yards, 2 touchdowns, a 119.5 passer rating. So he did just enough to give the Seahawks a victory. And honestly, I think that this game, what it really came down to was the Broncos and their failed red zone attempts, their failed goal-to-go attempts. Because there were at least 3 different scenarios when they're there at the goal line where they don't score. 2 of them are runs out of shotgun, they fumble the ball. The Seahawks defense was just like a brick wall there in the red zone. And if you're Nathaniel Hackett, you got to figure out that red zone because, if the Seahawks would have scored, one of those times, 2 of those times, they easily win that game. And because if you look at the yards in this game, if you only looked at the yards, if you didn't know the outcome, the Broncos outgained the Seahawks offense 453 yards to the Seahawks 253 yards. So the Broncos, honestly, they did a lot to lose this game for themselves, from their red zone offense to the poor clock management at the end of the game. But props to Geno Smith. He was a very efficient passer, especially in the first half. The second half, the Broncos pretty much shut down the Seahawks offense overall. But for Geno Smith in here in Seattle, where there was, with Russell Wilson leaving, it really seemed like this was like a rebuild and that they were going to be one of those teams to maybe get like a top draft pick. But after one night, the Seahawks are hyped. I know before the game, Pete Carroll was saying, like, this team can actually win, and I thought that was just him saying that. But clearly, they have some talent here. Their defense was playing very well. And funnily enough, the Seahawks offensive line, which Russell Wilson seemed to have issues with in his years in Seattle with all the times they sacked him, the Seahawks line last night did very well and really protected Geno Smith in that game and really allowed him to have time sitting back there in the pocket. So now we have the NFC West. When we look at these games, the Seahawks sitting there at 1-0. The 49ers lost. The Rams lost as well. And so the Seahawks have to be sitting pretty. The Seahawks fans are sitting pretty. I was looking at some comments from Seahawks fans on some different articles I was reading. And one fan was like, I don't care if we lose every single rest of the game for the rest of the season. Like, I'm hyped that we beat Russell Wilson when no one thought we would. So Seahawks fans are sitting happy after this week. Broncos are sitting there probably scratching their heads like, what was that play calling? Why did we kick that field goal? That was just that was an interesting decision by Nathaniel Hackett. He did say that the entire time they were sort of they knew where they needed to go to kick that field goal, and they got where he thought they needed to be. He clearly trusts the kicker, but I think that's just so risky. Even if you think he can make it, that's just a very risky decision for the Broncos. The Broncos starting off slow, and the Seahawks getting the victory. So that was a very crazy and very, it was an exciting ending to the first week of the NFL, the first Monday Night Football game. So now moving to what I wanted to talk about next is the Bengals game. The Bengals lose to the Steelers 23-20. This was a very poor performance by Joe Burrow overall, probably one of the worst of his career. He turned the ball over 5 times, 4 interceptions and 1 fumble, and also was sacked 7 times. So coming into this year, the Bengals did a lot to add pieces to this offensive line to try to protect Burrow, because last year the common theme throughout the entire season was Burrow consistently just getting smacked back there at quarterback, and he was sacked 7 times last night. So clearly they got to fix those issues up front, and then also Joe Burrow just, he was looking bad out there yesterday. But here's one thing I do want to, focus on is, even though Joe Burrow majority of the game was playing very poorly, when you throw 4 interceptions, I mean, it's very difficult to win the game. So the fact that they were sitting there in overtime with multiple chances to win the game is honestly crazy to me. So Burrow, with 1 minute and 30 seconds left, after already throwing 4 interceptions, leads the Bengals down the field, throws a touchdown to Jamar Chase with seconds left, and if it wasn't for the blocked extra point, they would have won that game. So they were very close to winning that game. They lost their long snapper with some kind of injury, which clearly hurt them, because even in overtime, another field goal missed. So Joe Burrow was able to almost win that game, even though they played pretty poorly the entire game overall on the offensive side of the ball. So Joe Burrow is a guy who just has that it factor. Like, it doesn't matter what happened in the past. It doesn't matter if he's thrown 4 picks. Like, he's going to drive down the field. He still has the confidence to push the ball down the field, and he basically should have won the game right there for the Bengals if it weren't for the missed extra point. So tough for the Bengals in their first game. I don't think many people thought the Steelers would win. But if you are the Steelers, yes, you won the game. I guess your defense played very well against Joe Burrow. But on the offense side of the ball, where there are some question marks with Mitch Trubisky in there, of course, they decided to start Mitch Trubisky over Kenny Pickett. Trubisky goes 21 of 38 for 194 yards, 1 touchdown, and 0 interceptions. And then Najee Harris, 10 carries for only 23 yards, 75 total rushing yards for the Steelers. So, obviously, if you're the Steelers, and you're a Steelers fan, you woke up happy that you won your game, you're 1-0 when people really didn't think you could win, but still the offense, it concerns me. The defense played well, forced lots of turnovers versus Joe Burrow, but I still think when it comes to the Steelers, like, there's going to be lots of games, I think, like this, where even forcing 5 turnovers, you're almost lost the game. So I'm a little worried for the Steelers, but I think the Bengals are going to respond. Joe Burrow is a great quarterback, and I think that he's gonna figure things out along the way. The downside, the big loss for the Steelers is the fact that TJ Watt suffered a torn pec, which there has been discussion as to whether he's going to have surgery or not. I think right now, How it stands currently is that he's planning to not get surgery, so that way he's able to come back in maybe like 6-ish weeks or something. So we'll see if that stands. But if they lose TJ Watt, that's a big loss for the Steelers defense. So hopefully for them, he's healthy. So now moving on to the next game, we have the Bears upsetting the 49ers in a crazy rainy game. The field looked like it needs to work on its drainage solution because there was just water all over the field the entire game. The Bears win that game 19-10. I, for one, did not expect them to win that game, even though they did bring out, Trey Lance instead of Jimmy Garoppolo. The Bears somehow pull out the victory 19-10. They started very slow. It was a very bad start for the Bears. Down 7-0 in the first half. They come back and win the game 19-10. After a very strong second half, Justin Fields finishes that game 8 for 17, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. And even though that's not some crazy good stat line, in the end there, I think he was one of the reasons the Bears were able to win this game. He found, the guy wide open, flings it over across the field, runs in for a touchdown. So if you're a Bears fan, you're excited from what Justin Fields showed, because I think he is a very electric talent. He's fun to watch. And they were able to come in here in the Matt Eberflus's first game and play very well. It was rainy, so when you look at Trey Lance and sort of how poorly he played, it's hard to judge him off of this game. Obviously, he didn't look great, but I think that for the 49ers and for Trey Lance, you have to give him some time for any of these young quarterbacks. But I do think when you look at the 49ers, the fact that they do have lots of talent on this team, and the fact that we've seen in the past, Jimmy Garoppolo, when he's in there at quarterback, he can win you games. He can do enough to control the offense, be that game manager. He may not have that athleticism or that, elite upside that a Trey Lance does. But I'd say if in the next few games, the 49ers continue to lose with Trey Lance and he's not looking good, I honestly think the 49ers could move back to Jimmy Garoppolo. They did bring him back probably for a reason, in case Trey Lance, doesn't pan out right now. And I don't think that necessarily means that Trey Lance isn't going to, play for the future for the 49ers. He's still a young quarterback, and because the 49ers, like the roster they have here, if Trey Lance struggles, they could think Jimmy Garoppolo could be the guy to come in and do enough to allow them to win games. And then maybe, a year or two later, Trey Lance can come in when, they think that they want to give him some more chances. But maybe he just needs more time to develop. It was one game, though, in a very bad situation in the rain. Justin Fields did get the better of Trey Lance. And so if you are the Bears, you're sitting pretty happy right now. Especially, we'll talk about it next, the Packers losing to the Vikings, which I was not happy about, as you know, as I'm a Packers fan. All my other fellow Packers fans who are watching this. But now the Bears are sitting at the top of the NFC North, which isn't typical. We have the Bears at the top, the Vikings at the top, and then, of course, the Lions lost, the Packers lost, and next week the Packers will face the Bears. So that should be a pretty interesting game. All right, so now let's talk about this Packers game once again. If you watched my main channel, you saw a little bit of this, but it was just a very sad performance to start the season for Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. We knew that this is a young receiver core. We know that it's going to take time for these young receivers to get used to playing in the NFL. For Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, first-year players, rookies who didn't play at massive schools, coming in week one, facing off against the Vikings in Minnesota, they had to have some nerves. They had to, coming into your first game ever, that's a tough situation to play in against a very good Vikings defense. And plus, you have the fact the Packers, unfortunately, were out without their top 2 tackles. David Bakhtiari at left tackle, Elton Jenkins at right tackle, and then Allen Lazard, who, if he was playing, Rodgers could have at least had someone he could have relied on more. He was injured as well. So there were lots of things stacked against the Packers in this game. I did think the Packers would win this game. I predicted a 27-17 victory for the Packers, and they could only score 7 points in this game. The entire game, they couldn't really move the ball down the field. When they did, they were at they were about to score. They couldn't get it in as well. And so when things like that happen, when you have the first play of the game dropped by Christian Watson, that would have been a touchdown. It was just an overall poor performance by the Packers. We saw it last year as well, getting absolutely destroyed by the Saints last year. Luckily, if we look at last year, hopefully the same thing happens for the Packers. They lose game 1. Then they win 7 games in a row. So I'm hoping that trajectory is what's going to happen for the Packers, because if we come in next week and face off against the Bears on Sunday Night Football at Lambeau Field and we lose that game, then there's going to be some concern for not only myself but all of Green Bay, because I think because we did lose that game as we did last year to start the season, and then we went on a run, I think that in all of us Packers fans' heads, we're like, okay, it happened last year, we'll be fine. But if we come out next game and we lose to the Bears, I'm going to be a little concerned. Not that we can't get things together, but even though the Bears did just be the 49ers, The Bears are not a better overall team than the Packers. That's my opinion. If you're a Bears fan, maybe you think the Bears are better than the Packers, but when you have Aaron Rodgers, when you have that talent on that offense that hopefully that is healthy, we'll see if Bakhtiari can go, if Elton Jenkins can go, if Allen Lazard can go. The Packers should be able to handle the Bears. So I'm not too worried up to this point. I am a little worried about the defense because they knew coming in they had to shut down Justin Jefferson, and they were just not able to. Justin Jefferson came in, had one of the best games of his career, like 184 receiving yards. The Packers defense just looked slow and sloppy. They weren't, Justin Jefferson many times was just wide open. Like, I don't know what was going wrong exactly. We heard in Matt LaFleur's, press conference in the past couple days after the game. People were asking, like, why was Jair Alexander not, like, manned up on Justin Jefferson, shadowing him the entire game? Because personally, I think that would have made sense. I'm not a defensive coordinator, so Joe Barry probably knows better than me. But when you have a shutdown corner like Jair, and you know Justin Jefferson is as talented as he is, like, put Jair near Justin Jefferson as much as possible, please, because we do not want to see that happen the next time the Packers face the Vikings. So the Packers defense is definitely sitting there trying to figure out exactly what went wrong. I know Matt LaFleur did talk about how they like to run a lot of zone on defense, and when you have one guy trying to move around the field, manning another guy, it really changes everything else for the defense as well. And so their plan seemed to be, we're going to run zone and try to stop Justin Jefferson that way. That clearly did not work. So we'll see what the Packers do coming in next week against the Bears, because the Bears offense is definitely not as talented as the Vikings offense. We knew coming to that game, the Vikings have a very high-powered offense. When you have, two of the best, running back, wide receiver with Justin Jefferson being one of the best wide receivers in the game, if not the best, he's definitely competing for that spot after his first performance of the year. And then you have Dalvin Cook, who is an elite running back as well. And you have Kirk Cousins, who I think is underrated, honestly. I think he gets too much flack for his play. I think he plays very well, and he played very well in his first game versus the Packers. And I want to take a look at Kirk Cousins' stat line. It was mainly due to the fact of Justin Jefferson was constantly open. Like, watching that game as a Packers fan, it's just like, you're watching that, you see Justin Jefferson, it's like, dude, how is he so wide open? Like, I don't know. I don't know why, but Kirk Cousins, his stats, 23 of 32, 277 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 118.9 passer rating. Aaron Rodgers, 22 of 34, 195 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. And I think another big thing in this game is Aaron Jones barely had the ball in his hand. He had only 5 carries. He averaged 9.8 yards per carry, 49 yards. We need to give the ball into Aaron Jones' hands much more than we did yesterday. A.J. Dillon had 10 carries for 45 yards. And so I'm not too worried, as I said, about the Packers. I think they're going to be able to respond next week versus the Bears. In Matt LaFleur's history here in Green Bay in his 3 years, now in year 4, he has shown that when he loses, I can't remember the exact stat, but he's very successful the next game. So they're going to come in here, they're going to figure out what went wrong, and I think they're going to respond very well against the Bears. If they don't, that's when I'll be like, what's going on? What's going on, Green Bay? So if you're a Vikings fan, way to go. Congrats. Good for you guys. Packers start 0-1 once again. So then moving on, we have the Chargers holding off the Raiders. The Chargers beat the Las Vegas Raiders 24-19. So the last time the Chargers played last season, the Raiders beat the Chargers in a crazy overtime regular season game to end the Chargers' hopes of the playoffs for that year. So the Chargers come in, respond well in this game. And Justin Herbert is, he's now one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. If you watched that game, you saw what he did there. 26 of 34 for 279 yards and 3 touchdowns. The O-line held up amazingly to protect Justin Herbert all game. Versus Max Crosby and Chandler Jones, they allowed a straight 0 sacks. So Justin Herbert had all day to throw back there. He was throwing dimes left and right. He has such a strong arm. He's such a big quarterback. He can run. He can throw. He can really do it all. And I think that the Chargers in that AFC West are going to be a team to watch, as I think we all sort of expected coming to the season. And they beat the Raiders 24-19. So if we look at the Raiders, of course, this offseason they came in, they stole Davante Adams from the Packers, which, is unfortunate for the Packers. After week 1, we could have used Davante for sure. But Davante did dominate this game. 10 receptions, 141 yards, and 1 touchdown. The issue with this game for the Raiders was Derek Carr and the fact that he threw 3 interceptions in this game. So his overall stat line, 22 of 37, 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. When your quarterback throws 3 interceptions, good luck winning the game. So I'm surprised that the Raiders were even in this game near the end. Derek Carr, I think he's a solid quarterback. He had a pretty bad day in this one. Definitely outmatched by Justin Herbert in this game. And one thing as well, we look at the Chargers and the additions they made, especially on the defensive side of the ball. The biggest one was Khalil Mack, and he came in here and he basically won the game for them in the end. He had a total of 3 sacks, and he forced a fumble in his first game, had 3 tackles for loss. And on that 3rd and 4th down, as the game was ending, the Raiders had a chance to come in and maybe win this game. Khalil Mack sacks him. Joey Bosa sacks him, I think, on 3rd down. Khalil Mack 4th down. So this Chargers pass rush is incredible, and they've greatly improved from where they were last year. We saw as well with the Bills, like when you add a player who is an elite pass rusher like a Von Miller, your pass rusher gets so much better. We saw Khalil Mack in here. He makes this defense so much better. Basically won the game for them in this one. So I think when you look at this AFC West, coming into the season, it really seemed like lots of these teams had a shot, and they were probably the best division in the NFL. And after 1 week, we have the Chiefs dominating. We have the Chargers winning. We have the Broncos losing to the Seahawks, which is shocking. And we have the Raiders losing. So the Raiders and Broncos sitting at the bottom, the Chargers and the Chiefs sitting at the top. I did sort of expect the Chargers and the Chiefs to sort of be battling for the number 1 spot there because I do think they have the most talented teams. But congrats to the Chargers in their first game of the season, getting revenge on the Las Vegas Raiders, who I think had some hopes coming in here with Devontae to dominate. Devontae did dominate because he's such an elite route runner. We saw it in Green Bay. Some people were wondering, is Devontae, a product of Aaron Rodgers? We saw in this game. I mean, I've never thought he was. Obviously, Rodgers helps. But even with Derek Carr, who is a solid quarterback, a downgrade from Aaron Rodgers, Devontae dominates with 10 receptions and 141 yards, and I expect his domination to continue going forward. And I do think the Raiders are a good team, but the Chargers show that they are slightly better at this time. Now moving on to stick with the AFC West, we have the Chiefs absolutely destroying Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals, 44-21. Coming to the 4th quarter, it was 37-7. The Cardinals put up some points in the end there. So the Chiefs just were in complete control pretty much all of this game. And there was some question as to, okay, what is this Chiefs team going to look like with Tyreek Hill gone? He, of course, goes to the Miami Dolphins. He's been with, Patrick Mahomes the entire time. And so it's like, what's going to happen? Of course, the Chiefs came in, brought in Juju Smith-Schuster, brought in Marquez Valdes-Scantling from the Packers, drafted Sky Moore as well. And in this game, we saw Patrick Mahomes have no issue moving the ball whatsoever. He threw 6 different receivers, had at least 3 catches on Sunday. He went 30 of 39, 360 yards, and 5 touchdowns. And in the red zone, they had 6 touchdowns. So pure domination from the Chiefs offense, not losing a step whatsoever with Tyreek Hill gone. Travis Kelce comes in, 8 catches, 121 yards, and 1 touchdown. So the Chiefs are having no issues without Tyreek Hill. And one interesting stat from this game is that Mahomes was blitzed on over 50% of snaps for the first time in his career. And that doesn't seem to be a smart plan. We see the result here. He's blitzed over 50% of the time, 54% overall by the Cardinals, and he just picked them apart the entire game. So maybe stop blitzing Mahomes. We saw last year when you sort of sit back and have those 2 high safeties back there, Mahomes struggles a little bit, but in this game, he just completely dominated. The Cardinals have a lot of work to do here, and with Kyler Murray there, Kyler Murray's an exciting player to watch. He's good with the ball, running, passing. He can escape the pocket, do all that kind of stuff. But I think that, when we look at the Cardinals and their history, they've started lots of seasons out hot, clearly not this one, and in the later half with Cliff Kingsbury have failed to play well. So the Cardinals have a lot of improving to do. No pass rush without J.J. Watt in this game. So Chiefs dominating, sitting there at the top of the AFC West with the Los Angeles Chargers. Then moving on, we were talking about in my first episode the other day of, Baker Mayfield, his revenge game, coming in to face off against the Cleveland Browns, who, of course, in the offseason decided to go with Deshaun Watson. They're like, Baker Mayfield, sorry, you're out of here. We don't really want you. Baker goes to Carolina. I thought the Panthers would win this game. It was a very close game. Jacoby Brissett, brings it home for the Browns, winning 26-24. And Baker Mayfield had an okay game, 16-27, 235 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He did almost win the game for them if it weren't for the Browns, moving down the field with Brissett in the last moments, kicking a field goal. Baker brought the Panthers back in the final minutes. He was driving down the field. They put up a field goal. They're ahead 24-23 with a minute or so left. Baker probably thinks he won that game. I thought he probably won the game at that point. But Jacoby Brissett comes in and leads the Browns to a field goal to beat the Panthers 26-24. So when we look at the Browns, I was wondering, how the Browns would look with Jacoby Brissett here without Deshaun Watson for the first 11 games. And I think if the Browns can stick around 500 and until Deshaun Watson comes back, then clearly they're going to be in a pretty solid position, because if Deshaun can get back to his former self, the Browns, I think, are going to be, one of the top teams if he can get back to how he was formerly playing. And a big reason the Browns won this game was, one of the best backfields in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt combining for 187 yards. They have one of the best backfields in the NFL. They showed it today, what's today? What is today? Is it Tuesday? Is it Wednesday? It's Tuesday, so that was Sunday. So, all right, so they showed it that day for 187 yards. And Jacoby Brissett didn't look great in this game. He only averaged 4.3 yards per attempt, which isn't good if you don't have a backfield back there with like a Nick Chubb, like a Kareem Hunt. You're definitely not winning that game. Let me find here Jacoby Brissett's exact stats for the game. I should have them somewhere around here. All right, so Jacoby Brissett in this game goes 18 for 34, 147 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 picks. So he kept the ball. He didn't throw any turnovers. So the Browns come in, start off 1-0 in this season, and the Panthers sitting there, on a loss with Baker Mayfield, not looking too hot in their first game of the season. And now moving on to the Dallas Cowboys, losing 19-3 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Of course, the biggest discussion right now is the fact that Dak Prescott injured his hand, and he is going to have to get surgery. I believe he already got it. I saw today that Jerry Jones said he could be able to play within 4 weeks. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. Maybe he's just trying to keep hope alive for Cowboys fans, because I live in Dallas, as I said last time, and it seems like most Cowboys fans are sort of like, the season's probably lost already, because even if Dak Prescott is completely healthy, we saw in that game, only putting up 3 points. I mean, it makes me feel a little better about the Packers. They put up 4 more points, so almost doubly as good than the Cowboys on offense. So there we go, Packers, way to go. But the Cowboys just absolutely not playing well in this game. The offense can't move the ball. Dak Prescott not able to do anything there. And that's what, the talk of the offseason was, is you lose Amari Cooper, you lose Cedric Wilson, you lose all these talented receivers, and you're sort of stuck to rely on, can Dak, elevate this offense? He was not able to in this game. For the Cowboys, they were only able to put up a measly 3 points against the Buccaneers. And in this game, the Cowboys defense did play well. You hold Tom Brady to 19 points. I think in the red zone, or when they were moving the ball down the field in that game, they settled for like 4 or 5 field goals. Luckily, I had Suckup, who is the Buccaneers kicker, so he pretty much won me my fantasy matchup. I barely won by 6, so thank you, Suckup, for giving me that victory. But the Cowboys defense played pretty well overall in that game, and I think it really came down to the Cowboys not being able to move the ball, and it was sort of expected when you look at just all the people that the Cowboys lost. You're starting a rookie there at left tackle, and you're not really able to get anything going. Dak Prescott, 14 of 29 for 134 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, sacked twice, a quarterback passer rating of 47.2, QBR of 15.3. So just not a great day for Dak Prescott. And then if we even look at the ground game, Ezekiel Elliott, 10 carries, 52 yards. Tony Pollard, 6 carries, 8 yards. So a total of only 18 carries for 71 yards. So the Cowboys completely outmatched against the Buccaneers and their defense. And so now looking at this NFC East, we have the Eagles, who beat the Lions 38-35. Jalen Hurts looked really good in that game. And so I predicted this year that the Cowboys would not win the NFC East. Obviously, with Dak getting hurt, that probably hurts their chances even more, depending on how long he's out. But the Eagles, sitting there at the top of the NFC East, and with Dak Prescott, with the unknown of how long he's going to be out, the Eagles have to be feeling pretty good right now. The Commanders won as well. And I think the question, for the Cowboys is, do they just go with Cooper Rush? Do they bring in another quarterback? There has been discussion. I've seen people throwing around Jimmy Garoppolo, who I didn't think would come, just because the 49ers may need Jimmy Garoppolo. I've seen Cam Newton thrown out there. I don't know. Cooper Rush in the past hasn't looked that bad. When he did come into this game, 7 of 13, 64 yards, 0 TDs, 0 interceptions. So I'm guessing the Cowboys just sort of stick with Rush for the few games that Dak Prescott does miss. If it is only a few games, maybe it ends up being more. Maybe Jerry Jones is trying to, give hope to the fan base that maybe Dak will come back sooner than expected. And then, let's say 4 weeks in, he's like, oh, actually, there's 2 more weeks. Because I feel like when you frame it that way to people, it sounds better, because if you're expecting them to come back, and then you just push it back a little bit, it doesn't seem as bad as saying, it's going to be 8 weeks for Dak to return. Then everyone's just like, what's the point? Why should I go to the game? Why should I buy your tickets? Why should I, show up and support Dallas, where Jerry's like, you know what, guys, like, it's only 4 games. Like, I'm not joking. It's only 4 games. Come to the games, please. We have a chance. Give us your money. But anyways, the Cowboys have a poor performance to start off their season. And then to finish off today's podcast, I want to talk about this Giants game. So the Giants, who in the offseason bring in former Bills coach, or not full-on coach, offensive coordinator Brian Daboll, who comes in and beats the Titans 21-20. This is another game I did not see coming. There are lots of games this week that I did not predict. This being one of them, the Packers being one of them, the Broncos being one of them, the Bears being one of. I mean, there's so many games this week that I did not see coming when it came to the final results here. But the Giants, especially coming down to the end there, Brian Daboll decides to come in and go for the 2-point conversion. You see that he trusts his team. He was firing them up on the sideline. You can tell that there's sort of a new energy here in New York with Brian Daboll as the head coach there, deciding to, go for the win instead of scoring the touchdown and going for the tie. He says, you know what, we're going for it all right now. He scores, he wins. And Saquon Barkley has a dominant performance. We've been wondering, can he get back to his former self? He's dealt with lots of injuries. He has been dealing with injuries since 2019. A high ankle sprain in 2019, a torn ACL in 2020, and there was just some concerns as, okay, he suffered 2 pretty serious injuries. Can he get back to his former self where he was Rookie of the Year back in 2018? So he finished the game 18 carries, 164 yards, 1 touchdown, and 6 catches for 30 yards. So the Giants were able to get the job done against the Titans team, who was the number 1 seed last year. We'll see if the Giants can keep it up, but I do think here, having Brian Daboll, he's clearly changed the atmosphere in New York, especially after this first week game. And I have a quote here from Saquon Barkley, sort of showing the trust that Daboll has built with these Giants players. So in Albert Breer's MMQB article earlier in the past day or so, he had a quote here from Saquon Barkley on Brian Daboll. He says this: "Thank you for trusting me and trusting in us." So I think that when you have a coach who clearly trusts his players, trusts that they can get the job done, that sort of builds the relationship between the players and the coach. Like when they believe that this coach believes in them, that they can get it done, that's clearly going to lead to a much better atmosphere over there in New York. So we'll see if they can keep this up. Is it only a one win? We'll see. I think for lots of these, games around the NFL, the question is, will the Bears be able to keep winning? I don't know about that one. Will the Broncos keep losing? I honestly think for the Broncos, I think the Broncos are going to be fine. As I already talked about, they played very well in offense besides the red zone, besides the poor clock management at the end there. I think the Broncos will be fine. But this was a very exciting first week of the NFL season. So if you watch this entire thing, I appreciate it. Subscribe to see more of these podcasts, and I'll try to get them out onto the other things as well. Let me know your comments in the comment section down below about this week, about the podcast, whatever you would like to state down there. But thank you so much for watching. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Luke_Beller, and I'll see you guys next time.